appreciate it so much. I'm just dragging today. And I have to get up early tomorrow for good things.
And you're going to have a long, long day.
Yeah, it's about 14 hours from here. Through rain, snow, and ice.
You really know how to have a good time, Don.
I do. I like to push the envelope.
Yeah, you got the full meal deal going there.
And that's why I'm going to do a little risk management tonight and go to bed early.
It's not a winter road trip unless there's like driving hell involved.
I did that yesterday, believe it or not, only to find out that they couldn't help me even though I had an appointment.
Well, I got my shot the other day. I got my COVID shot, so now I feel safe.
I'm
How's
jealous.
everybody tonight?
Hi, Christopher. I'm fine. How are you?
You look like you're all bundled up.
My cold time of day.
I sent the link out to everybody in the state, Don.
I saw that. Awesome. That's what it's all about.
You're looking about 500 to 600 instructors, if they all would come in.
Well, like I said, I'm restricted to 100, and I haven't gotten there yet. Look at Tony, man. He's on the ride. Who's going to do the cat thing tonight? So not only are you recording live, you're also on MSF Rider Coaches streaming.
I might implode.
No, I might implode. But it's all good.
Does that automatically stop once the Zoom is ended?
It does. Or you can stop it from the top left-hand part of the screen. Do you have the recording and live highlighted? You can stop it there before you exit, or just end meeting and it all shuts off.
Yeah, I see that. Or I could just put up a kickstand and then.
Please don't. You just mentioning that scares me. In today's world, then there
I'd
would
actually like to see her try.
more questions. Where did that come from? Have you been lying to us? What haven't you been telling us?
I got a really good Zoom filter.
Miss Lisa.
It's not the cat filter, is it?
No, I don't even know how to
Just
do
gonna
that.
mention that.
That was
no
the,
Hey, Lisa.
Hey, hey, Sal.
I like Sal's mustache filter. It almost looks real.
It's every time I try to drink coffee or something, I always have to wipe it off.
You grow a mustache a little longer, it counts as a face mask, I think.
It's one of the classic Lone Ranger things. He fought the caught the bad guy because he was wearing a fake mustache. And he knew it was fake because he kept getting food stuck in it. Somebody that grew their own mustache wouldn't get food stuck in their mustache, was the story.
I just got around to finishing, I think it was last week's video, and hope to have it posted by tomorrow morning before I take off, because it takes almost all night to process. But I thought it was an exceptionally good talk in the fact that we got to a lot of issues dealing with training motorcycles, how they fit, and the problems associated with having training cycles. So it was kind of cool to listen to that again.
Did you see the deal that KTM's doing with the Duke 200s?
What deal?
They're selling Duke 200s for $3,500 for training motorcycles.
That's a good deal.
And then you can buy crash bars and frame sliders and lever protectors for like another $250.
Again, a really good deal.
At that price, I'd take one for my personal use.
I hope someone gets a bunch and can report back in a couple seasons on how that went for them.
I'll volunteer my site. Let's buy 10 of them. Hi, Ron.
Get your checkbook out. I'll be happy to use them.
I just had it out. I just paid my county taxes.
Okay, then. Now you can buy some KTMs.
Well, one of them at least.
No, wait. You volunteered all of them, right?
If you have a chance to go to bike night somewhere, take that motorcycle with you. And when you start telling people they can ride that motorcycle in class, they get really excited. At least that's the experience we've had with the Duke 390s. When they realize they're not going to be riding some lame, in their words, bike, they are more likely to sign up for class.
Rita, where do you work that uses the 390s?
The technical college in Madison, Wisconsin. So when Jason Harrheim gets on, he can give more information about maintenance costs.
Which model is it?
The Duke 390.
Okay, thank you.
I rode that bike. I would buy that. If I had a reason to buy that, I would get one tomorrow. It was awesome.
I almost bought one for my wife, and she said I'd rather ride on the back. It disappointed me, because if I buy a bike for her, I have to maintain it and make sure it rides right and all that kind of stuff.
And ride it just because.
Well, to make sure it's safe.
You got to do a check ride.
That's right. It's a maintenance test flight.
Exactly.
I've tried using that same justification for buying another bike, saying it's my wife's, and she didn't quite go for it yet.
I told my wife I wanted to get matching bikes.
Before it didn't work.
And so she took us to the Trek shop.
So you ended up buying a bicycle. That's what you were talking about the other day?
I didn't buy it. She bought it. She lost the bet.
She bought a bicycle for you, or she bought herself a bicycle?
Yes.
A fat tire or a regular?
A regular. They call it a dual sport, but it's something that we can ride on and off pavement with. Pretty nice bikes, and the intent is there's a lot of, here in New York and other places we've been, there's a lot of train trails now where they have the paved. So our goal is to find a place where we can do copious miles and credit card at a hotel overnight and then ride back.
There is a repurposed train track trail in my backyard, actually, that we use pretty much every day.
For walking,
For walking and then biking and dog walking and running and whatever else. It's pretty much our main thoroughfare for if we want to go anywhere into town or farther out.
there's a real nice one in upstate New York that I've been looking at that is, it's got enough mileage that we could really enjoy it, but it's close to Ron, so I had to kind of reconsider that.
So I think there's actually a whole app that shows all or the vast majority of the rails to trails that you may find interesting and or helpful.
I've been looking for one single app that we can use for such things, but so far they're place oriented, not as much as, here's the national system.
Don, what constitutes enough miles for it to be worth the trip?
I want probably someplace where I can go 30 or 40 miles in a day and have enough places to stop that if we get tired, we can be refreshed and then go at it again. And then, of course, finding a place to hotel overnight, get something to eat, and then head back the next day, or if it's big enough, a loop, or maybe a multiple day trip.
I went out the Erie Canal towpath.
Yep. One of the biggest ones in the United States, by the way. But it's too cold right now.
Wear heated gear, just like you do on a motorcycle.
No, thank you.
I was on the edge of buying a fat tire bike finally this season, and you can get one that's not crazy expensive, but then when I was thinking about all the other gear that I'd have to buy, I can't do that. It's too much stuff.
I thought about buying a fat tire bike, but then I was thinking about all the pedaling I would have to do, and yeah.
I had a really good discussion with the shop owner because he also sells e-bikes and who's buying them and what they're using them for. And then, of course, that led to other discussions about where I've been and where I've seen e-bikes being used, and how America is about 5 to 10 years behind almost every European country on what they're doing. However, I'm seeing advertisements for New York City now, where they are starting to reinvigorate the city with e-bikes and mini mobile modes of transportation.
So what was the answer to who's buying them and what are they doing with them there?
Well, here it's mostly people in their late 50s, 60s, or 70s that want to go out and have electric assist if they get into trouble. And there are also a lot of people that are doing short commutes. So if they're within, say 5 miles of work and there's a trail system, they'll do that versus having a bike, and then they don't have to deal with New York style traffic. So not a lot of young kids not a lot of 20 or 30 years old, but as people get older and can't do the hills quite as well or maintain a good pace, those are the people that are picking them up, at least from his shop. Interesting, you know, different perspective. And so maybe not yet. I know there was a lot of talk at the IFC conference in 2018 about the new mobility of powered two-wheeled bikes and how it's going to spread everywhere, and young people are going to ride them, and that's how they're going to get around. That hasn't taken hold yet. But then, you know, I'm not in the city either. Some of those mobility devices in the cities are more apt to be used by people who don't have licenses yet. So that could be the difference between the shop I went to and what's happening in a larger city. That's just an assumption, though.
Yesterday, I was listening to a webinar, and one of the speakers was a futurist. His field of study is helping businesses and governments plan for the future, and he uses a 10-year horizon. Combined with what he said about trying to envision what the future might look like 10 years from now, and something I had listened to in the last couple weeks about figuring out what you want your goal to be, and basically starting with the end in mind. The other webinar talked about writing what you would see for press releases. And with this futurist talking about 10 years from now, I was thinking, what would a press release look like in our business for 10 years from now? And I was thinking about the powered two-wheelers, and all forms of powered two-wheelers, motorcycles, scooters, electric bicycles, electric motorcycles, and thinking about what a press release would look like 10 years from now would probably include all of those, and some type of a vision zero, either a press release or even just a news article about no deaths on any powered two-wheelers of any kind. And I think it would probably benefit the motorcycle industry in the United States to encompass more types of powered two-wheelers in order to ensure a vigorous future for all of us.
So, I understand the reasoning behind Vision Zero. Wouldn't that be a wonderful thing? Especially on two wheels. But, we still have crashes on four wheels or six wheels or eight wheels or 18 wheels. So, I hate to be a pessimist. I don't want to call it being a realist either, but I like attainable goals. And so how do we better market what we're trying to do versus just being zero deaths, zero accidents, etc.? Because if you're a normal person that isn't involved with stuff like this, is there anybody that's really normal? When you say Vision Zero, is that a turnoff? Does it shut them down because it's such a lofty goal? Or you get into the us and them thing of, well, that's not me, that's them.
When I talk about it in class, because in Wisconsin, part of our state specific is that we talk about zero fatalities in Wisconsin. I take a little bit of liberty and say 0 preventable motorcycle crashes, because there are going to be the heart attacks on crashes that are going to count in the statistics as a motorcycle fatality. So I think saying 0 preventable fatalities on the roadways tends to make it seem more attainable to the general public.
I'm just catching up. I haven't been watching the chat, and I apologize. Seriously, Mike, Bruce Springsteen?
Yeah, that led the evening news on one of the channels.
Was he driving a Jeep?
That was my first question. I thought that'd be hilarious, except that I don't have a lot of respect for DWI people. Sorry.
I didn't think it was possible for Bruce Springsteen to be arrested in New Jersey.
Does he even drive, is my question. You figure, he'd have a chauffeur or something.
Yeah, I have to assume he doesn't have to, but he is a car guy. He likes cars.
You guys are awful quiet tonight. What's going on? Did we wear you out last week?
Trying to keep up with the chat room.
It's pretty busy tonight.
It's all Paul's fault.
Don, it strikes me that the conversation about having 0 fatalities as a goal is just laden with a certain amount of controversy. If you object to that, are you objecting to the goal, or is the intent of reducing fatalities not something that we want to use language that includes the complexity of the topic? Certainly 0 fatalities is a nice soundbite. The whole conversation about the likelihood of getting to 0 fatalities and risk homeostasis, it does not make a good soundbite. I kind of wonder about the interface between the goal and the advertising about it. Curious if you have any thoughts about that.
Because I delve into so many things, I like to use a metaphor. And a metaphor would be, there will be no disease in the future. No one will die from cancer in the future. That's our goal. And yet, if we come up with a drug that gets rid of all that stuff, then we're putting all the pharmaceutical companies out of business. Because once you eliminate everything, you no longer need the pharmaceuticals to treat our ailments anymore. So it's a a way to get to goal 0 would be everybody stops using the vehicles. No more motorcycles, or no more driving. We use public transportation for everything that is on a rail and won't crash. But that's probably not going to work either. So, with some of my thoughts about the human element, I always go back to Jurassic Park. And I'm trying to think of the dude's name. He played the spider. No, the fly.
Jeff Goldblum.
Thank you. Jeff Goldblum is sitting in the Jeep and explaining to the lady that, you can't predict what's going to happen with Mother Nature. You drop a drop of water on your hand, can you predict where it's going to go?
Chaos theory.
What?
Chaos theory.
Yeah. And so do it again. Does it go in the same place or not? You know, so, you know, to me, my mind starts going off in these odd directions whenever we have a solid number on something like that. It solidifies it. An absolute, I guess, is what I'm talking about. And I don't know of any absolutes.
So use a different analogy. We'll stop hunger in the world. There will be no hunger in the world. Does that not then perpetuate the agricultural industry?
It could, sure. And logistics. What does everybody else like? I mean, you know, this isn't.
It is entirely possible to stop hunger in the world, but it is a logistical challenge. More importantly, it's a political. Hunger is a political tool, also. So when you start getting into third world countries that can't buy their own products. So your comment about does it not perpetuate the agriculture industry? On one hand, it may not, because in order to end hunger, you might have to do damage to the very industries that are profiting off of it.
I agree.
Great book out there, The Prophets and the Wizards, The Wizard and the Prophet, or something like that, worth reading.
I agree that regardless of the goals that you set, there are a variety of parameters that you maybe control and can't control. But I just used the agricultural idea because we were talking about goal setting. And isn't that a goal that we can set that certainly meets the needs of humanities while at the same time not eliminating or displacing an entire industry?
Deep thought going on tonight.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
Well, it doesn't have anything to do with the economy or anything, but.
Pull your mic down a little bit. It'll help.
Oh, sorry.
You moved it up on your forehead.
That mic.
There we go.
I was looking at my volume. I thought I was speaking way too loud. My question is that I'm still in a very much of a learning process. I've only been doing this for a few years now. And I've been getting a lot of phone calls from people who are hearing challenged, that they wanting to learn how to ride a motorcycle. Matter of fact, I had a discussion with Mark from Arizona today asking about, and that's why I wanted to ask you guys, because you guys are a wealth of information and experience more than I have in teaching those who are deaf. So the advice I was given to or helped with was that in your interpreters, you really need to work in concert with your interpreters so that they know where you're headed in speaking. And also you may need up to 2. So has anyone here taught hearing impaired people or deaf? And what was your experience? Maybe help me out.
Salvador?
Yes, here in Rochester, we have the National Institute for the Deaf. So there's a large population of college age and young and a little bit older individuals who make themselves available to that institution. So Ron Heinz certainly can talk a lot about the experiences of teaching those with hearing impaired.
Salvador, if I may. Dennis Mead here in St. Louis. About 10 years ago, classes I was teaching at the community college, I got notified I had about 3 or 4 students that are hearing impaired that wanted to take the class. Now the community college, I can't remember if the community college paid for it or if the students themselves, but they brought in interpreters for them. Now, when this class went, there's two. There was a full-size range. There's two coaches. One of the hearing interpreters was next to me. The other hearing interpreter was next to the other coach. Now, every time we were talking to the students, that hearing interpreter naturally was signing for those students. And like I said, there was 3 or 4 students that were hearing impaired. Now, from what I remember of the class, every one of those students passed the course. Now, I don't know what Arkansas has available or community colleges might have available in the Little Rock area, but something worth thinking about, worth looking into.
Well, we do have a school here in Little Rock for the deaf and the blind. And after this subject matter came up from a prospective student, I started looking into things. So probably my next visit is to go visit the staff at the school for the deaf and see how they can become involved, maybe help me out. But I guess the other part, and you answered a good question there, who provides the interpreter? And it sounds like the student would have to provide their interpreter with them.
Not in all cases. Don, excellent. Thank you, Don. Don just put a link in the chat, Salvador, to an excellent video we had 3 months ago of someone who did a presentation on teaching to deaf students, and he mentioned several different sources. There may be some state funds available for paying for interpreters. The college may be able to do it. The student may have to, but it's, as I recall from that presentation, I think there's usually some state or county or something or grant funds somewhere for paying for interpreters. But if you look in the chat, there's a link to that presentation. He did an excellent presentation on it.
So the presentation was on 21 June. Dagnabbit. Sorry. I just killed myself here. And it was presented by Chris Perry, who has also presented at IRETS in the past. Really good discussion about deaf students.
Hey, Sal, typically when you have interpreters in class, you're going to have 2 all the time. They work in a half-hour cycle. So the one interpreter will be doing the sign language, and then the other one will be resting. They work in that half-hour cycle, and it usually costs for about a 20-hour class. It's anywhere between $800 and $1,000 per interpreter. In Illinois, we have to pay for them. That's an ADA requirement. So if a student comes to the class, we have to pay for it to make it ADA eligible.
So that would be if you accept the student?
Yep.
If you accept the student, then I would have to pay for the interpreter if that's what the law states here as far as
in Illinois, it's a state-run program. All sites are state-run, so if they go to any of our training locations, it would be ADA requirements to fulfill. And that could also be on a private entity as well. It depends on how it's done in your state.
And you may or may not have a choice whether or not to accept that student based on an ability thing. Because if you turn down a student and say, sorry, I can't teach a deaf student, that's an ADA. ADA, just so everybody is refreshed, is the Americans with Disabilities Act that provides protection for Americans with disabilities. So you may not have the option to turn down a student, and you may have to do whatever it states in your state or at a federal level.
Right. You can, based on the ADA requirements, get exceptions to stuff. You can do reasonable limits, but if you can't meet even the reasonable limit to try to teach them, you could run into issues.
Okay. Thank you. Okay,
So-
there we can go back to the economy.
Well, I wanted to go back to you, Sal, if you don't mind, because last week you were asked a question. I believe it was by Lara about
mentoring.
Yeah, mentor and be mentored.
Yeah, and I did bring some. I had, and sorry that I begged off like that because I did have an appointment to go someplace, but in the meantime, it allowed me to go digging for my information that I used to use a long time ago, and so I had to update it as well. So if a lot of you, I got on the forum one day and somebody was talking about mentoring, so I put a story out there about a young man who works for me. He started out as a student. And this particular student, he took motorcycle riding like a duck to water. In the 3 days I had him, he showed a lot of potential as not just as a good rider and a student, but possibly I was looking for a range aid. And during the time that me and the other coaches were observing him, we would also observe that this young man would go over or make himself available to the other students, because the other students would come and ask him questions and trying to figure out what they were doing, right or wrong. I lost everybody. I'm sorry.
We're still listening. You're right here.
Now, for a while, your mic was getting real choppy and breaking in and out.
Okay, my apologies. But anyway, so as we would watch him, every time that he got to a question in which he really wasn't sure of his answer, he would bring him over to the coaches. So this went on for 3 days. And at the end of the 3rd day, I offered him a job. I said, would you like to come and become a range aide? And that began our process as far as mentoring. I guess one of the things is, you know, when you start offering mentoring-ships to people, are you going to make them informal or formal? Are you going to be able to have the time for them? And in my case, since he was my range aide, I saw him about every other weekend. So that would give him time to read over material that I would give him about what's on the cards. I would also use my RCG as far as the exercise go. I'd let him read through that. And then when he came back and he would do his demos, now this, you got to understand, this process has been taking on over 1.5 years now. And he's in high school still. And his goal is to become a coach someday. So every time we would meet, the coaches would give him, when he would do his demo, we would let him do the demo, the simulated practice, and talk about it. Of course, we're standing there right next to him to make sure that everything was being said. So we would give him input. We would tell him what he did right and what he might have could do better. But I think the biggest thing was to be very, very supportive with him. That not everything's going to go right the first time you get out there and start talking to your students, because as a coach, I make mistakes from time to time. I stumble over my tongue and I have to restart, things like that. So I think that as far as the mentorship that we've been working with on him, it's been pretty much, it's a kind of informal thing. We haven't set, an end date or when you're going to finish and graduate out of this, but just bringing him along. So again, I'm not a super teacher by any sorts, but I think that what this young man is bringing to the table will be very much appreciated, especially the younger crowd. I use him a lot when I have a young crowd of students because he clicks right away with the younger crowd versus me, the old man standing over there looking grouchy, you know, and my arms crossed and stuff. So that's pretty much the way I do it and deal with mentoring this young man.
Sal, could you reiterate or say again what you posted about what the steps are of that mentoring process that you described that you said I think came from the military? Because I hadn't seen or heard that before.
Well, it's a process. It's known, it depends on which book you read or which books you're given to read about mentoring. You know, some people say there's 5 steps, some people say there's 4 steps. Basically, the steps that I use there's 4 steps. And that was preparation, negotiating, enabling growth, and then coming to closure. Those are pretty much the steps you use, and you know they kind of intermingle with each other. It's because as you prepare yourself, like I said, when you're preparing yourself, you're seeing how much time can I give this person. How much time does he want? Where does he want to go with his growth? You know, in this case, he wants to become a coach someday. So, and then the part that we did as far as enabling him, as far as that when he does his demos, he gets to talk about how he did it, what you can do to succeed in riding. I think he loves to do counterweighting. We really sometimes have to hold him back and say, stop showing off and show the student how you do this. You know, when he does his U-turns and stuff like that. So he's pretty good at it. And when students ask and we let him talk, he is able to demonstrate the counterweighting and how to place weight on the opposite side and turning his head and things like that. And someday when maybe you guys are here in Little Rock, come by when I'm having a class and we'll let this young man, you know, show off for you. But like I said, these are not all like set steps. These are the parameters in which you're going to be working in. So someday we'll come to the closure part, but right now we're still in his growth stages and working in those areas.
Salvador, you got him set up to become a rider coach?
We're working on it. We are working. Right now, he just turned 18.
Oh, he's that young.
He is that young.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, I was when I found out his actual age and stuff like that, I started searching around to trying to find a class for him to go attend, but that's kind of in the background a lot right now. He's getting ready to go to college. He's also getting ready to join the military, so he's got a lot of things on his plate. So this part, as far as him becoming a coach right now, is limited to being the range aide, and hopefully someday we will get some time and get him to a class someplace. I have a mentor out there too, but she'll probably not want me to say her name, Lisa, but she's helped me tremendously in the job I'm doing these days. So
I learn a lot from you, Sal. It's good to see you tonight.
Thank you. It's good seeing you. Where's Ringo?
He's around here somewhere. I had to put peanut butter in his Kong to calm him down. The ice and snow has everything messed up right now.
Oh.
So.
Okay, new subject. Who wants to take the floor?
So I just have to say kudos to you, Sal and Lisa, because we talk all the time about being a mentor or being mentored by somebody. And I remember a saying from my early college days that goes, each one teach one. If you can reach out and teach one person what you know and pass on, they're not only going to know what you taught them, but they're also going to learn what they learn along the way. And when they teach somebody, the next person gets the cumulative effect of what that person has learned. And so if each of us have that ability to be mentored by somebody that has an impact upon you, and then we are able to mentor somebody else, that's a pretty big thing. It's a pretty special thing because it's giving. And typically, if you're a mentor or involved with mentorship of some way, you're always giving of yourself, and the what you get back is tenfold in gratitude, of seeing other people do better. It's priceless. You can't put a dollar amount on it. And I know I'm preaching to the choir about it, so I'll shut up.
I did break out this one little statement, and I'm going to read it verbatim. It was written by Lindsay Cox. Not really sure where she's out of, but she goes, being a mentor is being a trusted advisor. Being a mentor involves making yourself available to support and to advise somebody when they need it. Delivering that support in a way that makes sense to them and always keeping the person's best interest at mind. And I had to really look. I remembered that when I was a long time ago when I was being mentored in the service, in the military. You go to those leadership courses, they beat leadership into you, don't they, Don? And so that's something that I've always remembered. It took me a while to find that, but that's exactly what I believe in as far as being a mentor. I'm sure that many of you out there probably mentor others that you see a good perception in as far as prospects and being a good rider coach. Well, that was my 15 seconds of fame. Thank you for listening.
Sometimes don't you think that it kind of starts with you as the potential mentor giving somebody a nudge and saying to them, hey, you should do this, or hey, what about this thing, or kind of just pushing them? I think that seems like it's the biggest leap in that process of doing something that's maybe new and scary. And I feel like that has been gifted to me a lot of times in my life and has been beneficial. And I feel like that's always something that I'm kind of like trying to think to do for other people to start that process.
I have this idea that.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I have this idea that a mentor's first step is to show faith in the potential capabilities of another person. And I use as an example, we reached out, I have a charity, we reached out and said, we want to create young board members that will eventually become charity board members throughout their lifetime or philanthropists throughout their lifetime. So we started with kids who were sophomores in high school. And I have one of them, of the three that we started with, who calls the board meetings, pitches new ideas. She's absolutely amazing. She is still only a senior in high school. So within 3 years, she becomes a board member more active than more than half the board members on my charity. You show faith in their potential ability, and that's where they run from.
So it's like what Rita started out by saying, what is the 10-year goal? What is the destination? And then working backwards from there.
I don't think.
Well, I was going to say that you know, part of being a mentor is kind of, I guess, giving the excitement of wanting to learn more. So I think a part of it is recognizing a job well done, and there's a little breakthrough or a leap, or, you know, something happens that's noteworthy, just to give them props for it and say, gee, I really liked how you handled, you know, such and such. You know, I thought that was really good, you know, and sometimes that just starts a conversation going about other situations and ways that they might be handled.
I don't think you necessarily even have to find young motorcyclists to mentor in our profession. Talking about finding high school students and finding people who don't even necessarily ride. The Technical College in Madison, Wisconsin has, as part of the college, what they do to help with diversity and help with growing people who wouldn't necessarily be heading toward a specific direction. They provide funds for employment within the college for non-traditional employees. And one thing that I would like to see someday is for the motorcycle to be able to hire range aides who are from underprivileged neighborhoods, who aren't riders, but who want to come and work, who would come and hang out and be range aides, and just simply through the process of being there, they would look at motorcycles, they would learn from people who were caring. They were all, I think, just because of the fact that we're in this business and all trying to do it well, it helps us be better teachers and better role models, that we would be able to grow motorcyclists, and because of that excitement that those people working on a range would get in learning about motorcycling, they would take that back to their friends, and we would not only grow that person as a motorcyclist, but probably a few of their friends as well.
Giving a nudge to a non-motorcyclist, Rita.
Well, I think that when you see a potential in your approach a person, you see their potential, but they don't see it yet. So you want to walk up to and open the window for them. That's how I look at it. I want you to see what you can be, even though you don't see it. I think when we all start out in our careers, we all are like, oh, I don't know if I could ever do that. You know, and somebody will come along and open the window for you and let you view in or out and say, and see it. You know, that comes from the time that the mentor goes, why don't you try that and see what you think? In this case, it's a young man who I put on a motorcycle, and he's doing my demos, and now he gets to talk about his demos. He finally has come in and said, you know, I really want to do this. So it's opening that window. And of course, I'm kind of an old man now, but you look back and you say, here's somebody who can replace me as a younger man now, and he can come forth and do the same thing I was doing as far as a rider coach. And so someday we'll get him into becoming a rider coach and start teaching classes.
I liked what you said, Sal, about preparing somebody to take your place, because I think that's a huge thing that I've always had in my mind. And I've said it in job interviews, much to the dismay of the people who I was there to try to get a job from, was that my goal is always to learn and be the best that I can be in a position, but also mentor those people around me and identify people who have the potential of taking my place should I not be here anymore, or if I have the ability to move up into a larger responsibility. I'm not going to take those old responsibilities with me. I want somebody else to be able to gain the knowledge of being in the position I was once in. So it's always about preparing myself for the future, but also somebody else to take my place so the system doesn't get screwed up. I think that's important.
I agree with that 100%. But it's
It
finding
seems
that
like-
person to replace you sometimes and getting them to be willing to take the torch when you're ready to pass it.
It seems like that must be something that the military does a really good job with, because I hear that theme from people like you all regularly. And I think in public at large, it seems more like people are spending their time and energy trying to justify their position and or their existence in the workplace. And they maybe even actively try to prevent people from being as useful as them.
I think that's true of parenting too. There's a difference between parents who are working to try to make themselves jobless and parents who are working very hard to maintain their job for a very long time.
Likewise with rider coaches, right? Like there are some rider coaches who don't want their students to achieve any level of independence because then they kind of lose their power or their cred. And then there are others of us who are like, I really want you to be able to get this right so that you can get it right the next time and the next time.
I love it when my rider coaches become autonomous and I don't need to babysit them or worry about them or have a care if I take that rare, weekend off, that I know people are in good hands and, my range is in good hands and I don't have to worry about anything. Mentor away.
It's building that team. It's definitely, for me, building that team. Now, I've just got a small group of coaches. There's only 6 of us, but together we work together and we work. And the nice thing about it is that we're at a point where we can all pretty much rely on each other as to what we need to do when we're out on the range. And then we can also rely on each other when somebody needs a day off. I need this weekend off. And somebody will just step up and say, yeah, not a problem. I'll walk right into it. And even including myself, now taking a vacation and not worry about what's going on at the range. It's really, really nice. You build a team like that.
Someone asked in chat earlier if there were folks on here who taught for Riding Academy. How can we help whoever that was?
Oh, hey, Rita, I hogged that guy all for myself. I'm texting with him right now. I was like, yes. I loved that Street 500 so much that I went and got the 750. So I'm a huge fan of their program just because of the bike. And it's the MSF BRC anyways. So how could you not be a fan?
So I wanted to jump back and kind of close out the last topic as it comes to the hour, because I'm going to check out and the other co-hosts are going to take over. But what happens if somebody who inspires us or nudges us in the right direction goes away? And I say this because, and I just went back and checked, the first Tribe Talk, at least that I recorded, and I think it's the actual first one because of the slide deck, maybe it was the second one, took place in March 21st of last year. And we're coming up on our 1-year anniversary of doing all this stuff. And so for those of you who are a little bit newer, you know, we've met pretty much every Wednesday since the 25th of March last year. And for the first couple of months, we were meeting every Sunday too. And now we're like to 1 month, one Sunday every month, which is, I think is something important. But what I have said to a few select people is that I'm not going to do this forever. I was going to give it a try for a year and see what worked out. And so now we're coming up on a year, and we still are doing pretty well with the amount of people who are participating, but there certainly could be more. And another couple people I may have mentioned that I have some goals that I need to start working on, and that come April, I'm going to be headlong into those goals, and I may not be around. So with that in play here, thinking about being a mentor, being mentored by somebody else, and taking over for when somebody's gone, what's the potential of this carrying on longer? How would we go about that? And that's not rhetorical. I actually want to hear your views, your ideas.
Well, I'm sure this isn't exactly what you want to hear, Don, but because of this platform and what you've done for us, I've been trying to figure out how to take that forward to my day job, where we have leadership. We used to have leadership lunches once a month where several of us would get together and inspire each other to talk about how we can be good leaders, whether from above or from below. And so I'm trying to figure out how I can plant a seed to make this happen for a leadership lunch at least once a month through my work.
That is very applicable, and I like hearing such things. And I know other people have done it, you know, in my conversations with others, where they're getting their rider coaches together for professional development workshops or the various other things that we can apply this to. And I think that's great. But you were also the same person that told me, was it last week, that there can be too much of this, where there's so many little things. How do we decide which one to go to? So once again, how do we continue this on? If I walk away in April, who's going to carry the torch? I'm giving you fair warning, aren't I? Not that this isn't about me. This is about us, the community. How do we carry this forward?
You see the look of panic on everyone's face, don't you?
No, it's not panic. It's just like, good thought. How are we going to do it? You know?
Maybe, did I get that to work right? Yeah, I did. Maybe after we have a group, maybe it could be this person hosts on the first Wednesday of the month. This person hosts on the second Wednesday of the month. We set up some kind of rota that way.
I think that's a great idea.
Or even just take volunteers. Hey, I can host this date, but I can't do that date. So it doesn't have to necessarily be the same person on the first. We could just have kind of a like a group sign up. I can take this date, I can take that date.
That's a great idea too. We tried that with the original Tribe Talks, and it worked for about 3 or 4 months, and then it was hard to find people to fill in. So, and I'm not telling you that it can't happen. It can, but it does take work. I posted an Excel spreadsheet out there for those people who are interested in the 3 MTs. And once again, giving back to other rider coaches, if we build a library of these quick pieces of knowledge that we can pass on to others, It's something that we don't have to be around for. And yet, you know, pulling teeth. I know I'm asking a lot from you. I'm trying to find the way, a way to not only help us, but to help others. How do we keep it going? How do we get more people involved? Over 5,000 rider coaches in the United States. And we have representation here from the entire United States. Pockets, at least. How do we keep it going? I don't know. Something to think about for next week. And you can talk bad about me after I leave in a couple minutes. I don't know.
Well, it's kind of a, you know, I say this as being the younger as far as the experience level, okay?
You got
It
to
would
quit
be
saying
hard.
that, Sal. You have a lot of good experience. Stop.
Well, and I mean in rider coaching, okay, in developing a program or working this program. But it would be hard to sit here and go, and I guess it would be more of a moderator position and saying, okay, Rita, you go ahead and talk, or Sarah, go ahead and say something. Dennis, your turn. You know, it's hard to sit back and just listen and not, because my experience level in the subject matter is limited. Maybe that's how I should have said it, versus, you know, other experience levels. So, and I think that when I listen to you all talk, because many of you in there who are not talking right now have a vast knowledge of running this program, okay? And I guess those are the guys that I'm looking forward to listening to spout their knowledge and let it flow, so that I can be over here with a cup and start filling my cup up.
Well, no, I had the privilege of hosting happy hour once, and in truth, it sort of guides itself. It doesn't require a lot of input. The conversation goes where it's going to go. Maybe you have a question or two to pop out there if things stall, but it doesn't require a high skill set to be the host. No offense, Don.
No, I completely agree, and I am the poster child of what you just said.
That would probably cover most of us.
That's kind of what I was going to say too, Lynn. I don't think that there's ever been a tribe talk where we haven't found things to talk about, whether they are motorcycling or motorcycling adjacent or not at all motorcycling. So yeah, I mean, it's not like it's necessarily a hard job. I can count on one hand the number of times where, Don, you've been here and you've had to be like, okay, take a deep breath in some way, shape, or form. That's happened maybe like 2 or 3 times ever. So
we all do it every time we walk into a classroom and facilitate students. There's no difference.
So when I think about the question that you're asking, what scares me is not like the showing up and the doing this thing. It's all of the behind the scenes work that I know that you do, getting those emails out, making the videos, and, you know, giving a blurb on the email about what's been going on, and all of those kind of more admin things. Like, to me, that's the holy crap, I can't do that kind of thing.
Just like the last comment, if I can do it, anybody can do it. It's really just understanding it. I didn't mean to bring you all down by asking such a difficult question.
Guess we're gonna have to draw straws.
Well, I'll leave it as a topic to consider till next week, of course. And if you would take the time, at least look through the 3MT list to see if there's something that inspires you. I picked it all out of the Rider Coach Guide, so you're all familiar with it. You know, I'd really like for us all to leave a small mark on the community where people can reach out and attain a little bit of knowledge and not feel like they can't talk to us about it or they don't have a place to go to find the information. And I know everybody has a support system, but I think it's better if we have a larger support system and we aren't afraid of sucking in front of each other. And by the way, Lisa, I did make a video. I just haven't got it finished for you. All about the suck.
Don, real quick before you go, did anybody else have trouble opening that 3MT file? I encountered nothing but errors and yeah, I had all kinds of trouble. I never could get it open.
No, it opened for me.
Would someone possibly email it to me if I put my email in the chat?
I can send it to you, Nicole.
Thanks. You have my address, right, Rita, or do you need it again? Okay. Thank you.
Beware of kickstands.
Come on now. Dagnabbit.
It is organizing some kind of leadership or some way to address Don's apparent imminent departure. Is that something that would get traction on the Facebook page? And I'm asking because I don't participate in Facebook, so I have no idea what goes on there.
Kickstands go on there.
Who let him in?
Oh, I did. Sorry. Hi, Jason.
Yes, it's better late than never. Jason showed up now.
Jason, tell us again all about using Duke 390s for a training motorcycle. Folks were asking before you came on about maintenance costs, and perhaps you could share a little bit about your experience taking them to Cycle Gear open houses to advertise the program.
Well, aside from that Cycle Gear thing, I would think you would be as much an authority on these bikes as I am. Well, so let's see. We bought Duke 390s. Maintenance-wise, they need tires more than other bikes when rider coaches have fun with them. But other than that, it seems to be pretty good. We got, I would say we have 3 seasons out of a bike before it required tires, and that was somewhere around the 1,500 mile mark. And it was bike tires front to back probably aren't so bad. We haven't had to throw brakes at one, and due to COVID, I have no reports on how much wear they had from the year before. We did send them to one of our satellite campuses that has 6 classes a year when they were getting close to tire replacement, but I didn't quite want to do it, so we pawned it off on the guys who don't teach much for class. We have 2 different years. So we have the, I want to say 16s, and then we bought some 18s, and there was a frame change, but the reason we bought them, or, you know, I keep saying we, but I guess I got to be the guy at the trigger, was that they have a tremendous crash protection kit available that's a legit KTM part, and I was, being that it was a KTM part, I've always been kind of warned with the MSF's request, I'll call it, that we do not modify motorcycles from stock to be used as training bikes. So of course and I've heard others that do this, and I don't think it's wrong, but we've never lowered a bike for our shorter students or anything like that. So I was looking for legit KTM accessories, and the crash kits are just so gosh darn good. ABS was a big plus. They are larger, I suppose, not necessarily for the short inseam folks, and have a little bit of rear shock to back that up. Taking them to cycle gear for bike night. I think we got KTM Dukes and Groms in the same year. And they were really popular then. So we had people that were literally calling the program and saying, we want to test drive this bike. I said, well, fantastic. Take a class and we'll see what we can do for you. So it's worked really well. We went to cycle gear for a bike night because they were new and nobody had one. So that drew some attention. We did a couple other dealership bike nights, and at one of our dealerships ended up with a small cone course, and it turned out to be more of a showing off what the instructor bikes can do. Not like, hey, look at us, but it became iffy whether or not we're going to let customers ride those bikes in a cone course at a dealership. But that also brought some interest from coaches from other states who knew about it. We had some coaches from Illinois that came up to check it out because they think we're nuts. Turns out that they are great friends now. Robin is one of those people. So, well, we've had good luck with the Dukes. So much so that I bought 2 more. And I would buy them again, except now there's a 200 Duke. So I'm interested to see what's going on with that. And KTM says they're going to give us $500 a piece for putting them in a training program. And I haven't talked to the dealer past that point. The other thing that I know is a crash protection kit is a direct fit from the 390 to the 200. So that sounds promising. Sitting on the 2 bikes side by side, the 200 is negligibly shorter, negligibly smaller width-wise, and basically has less electronic farkles, but it still has ABS, and that's all I know about it because I've never actually heard the darn thing run. How's that, Rita?
Awesome.
Oh, there was one change. They were the first liquid-cooled bike that we had in our fleet. So now you have coolant to test if you live in an area that freezes. And the other thing that we found out is that the radiator cap is below the coolant recovery tank. So if you ever go to check the radiator, you will have a mess. So we learned we can adjust. It's not a big deal. Fuel injection's awesome. And the only problem we had was one of the fuel pump seal O-rings failed on one of them, and we had a little bit of a mess, but it wasn't a big deal. And there was a recall for that particular part, I believe. So other than that, pretty bulletproof. Not as cool as our Suzuki Vans, but from a popularity standpoint, it's a cooler motorcycle.
Are you kidding about the Vans? Or not?
The Suzuki Van is flat out the best training motorcycle I've seen in years. As we're at the motorcycle show, and 3 of us are standing around and looking at it, and the rep comes over. Oh, do you guys like this? Do you have an RV? And like, no, we're trying to figure out if the radiator is going to touch the ground when we kick it over, which of course draws like, what the hell is wrong with you people? I'm like, well, we want to buy bikes and we want to see how it crashes. And it's fantastic. I've seen them do incredibly stupid things and we haven't broken one yet. Bolt tires off the ground and crashed on its side, and that bike ran for the rest of the day.
Did the handlebars get bent?
No, I think the triple tree did, and it required a little bit of a twist and it went back to straight enough.
They're super easy for students to learn on. I almost hate putting students on them because they're too easy and too forgiving. So then when they get on something more challenging, it might be a surprise to them.
It seems like for at least a couple years there, that was really the only thing that would work as a training bike that was out there, other than stuff that we already had or just had been around and just needed to be updated so bad it wasn't even funny. So I'm glad the KTMs exist now. I think that's cool. If Minnesota ever gets to get new bikes at all, ever, which at this rate will be gone before that happens.
Hey, if what you have works, who cares? That's great, but the way our funding system works is we have an obscene amount of money set aside to buy motorcycles. So I started buying motorcycles.
Womp womp. That's terrible, man.
Yeah, it's terrible when now we have nothing. So now I just have Jason's money, and all I can afford is C125s.
There's nothing wrong with the Z125. They just have a lot of plastic on them.
Well, I have 11 of them. That's 11. Well, it's 9 too many, as 2 of them were bought for my children. But I think the 14-year-old's going to step up to a KTM 200 this year or next year, and by the time he has a license, he'll probably be on the street with a 390 or a Kawasaki Z400.
It's really challenging when a student is struggling on the Z125s to not say, well, if Jason's 10-year-old can ride them, I'm sure you can ride them too.
Any issues with tall people on a 200 or the 390?
Well, the 200 I can't speak for directly, but I'm going to say no. The 390 has been spectacular for taller folks. No, not where like your hands are hitting your knees or anything like that. Of course, you know, there's extremes for everything, but it seems to be a better choice. One of the other bikes that we have is Hyosung 250. I want to say it's an R, but it might not be. It was before they had a full-fared version. It's pretty old, but that bike's been absolutely bulletproof and really well suited for bigger folks.
On the other hand, I looked at the specs on that KTM that Christopher was talking about when he sent the information out to us, and I think I wouldn't ever be able to ride it because I don't have the inseam for it, sadly.
Yeah, I would say solid, got to be 28 and a half plus inch inseam to even teeter on that bike, I think.
What are you talking about, the 390?
Even the 200 is not that much shorter than a 390.
But is there any factory lowering kit stuff or not?
Not.
There's not. Is there aftermarket for those?
I'm sure there's got to be. Somebody makes them, and I haven't even looked at the suspension to figure it out. When I got a Z125, the first time when the kid really was 10, he was very upset with me, and he's like, "My feet don't touch. I don't feel comfortable." And I have a lowering kit for it that I never put on it. It turns out when you put Dad in the back seat and let him drive it around, his feet touch just fine.
Yeah, all of our Groms have been lowered, and half of our Suzuki 250s have been lowered. Nicole, do you all have a prohibition against doing that with your training bikes? Lowering them?
I'm looking at Scott's face and his nodding head up and down. Yeah.
Oh, you're not allowed to do that even?
No.
So that's interesting because there's that specific thing in the MSF regulations about what a training bike needs to be. And I think as it comes, the Grom is taller than that.
Yeah, but it's 2 out of 3.
Oh,
so
yeah.
you could have a really tall bike that's little with a small engine and be fine.
Yeah.
Or a street, which, you know, I want to know if that rule existed before there was a riding academy. Or Rider's Edge, if it were.
I had a student on a Grom who was 4'11", and now granted she owned one on her own, but she hadn't been riding her own. And her partner who came to take the class with her was very concerned about how tall that bike was. But she did really well in the class, and she could touch enough on both sides that she was comfortable.
And you know, you can't just go by measured seat height. It's a whole equation of width and height and where you carry your weight and how long your legs are. And, you know, people call me up and say, "Oh, I'm 5 feet tall. Am I going to fit?" And I'm like, "I don't know. Come on down and try one on. We'll see if it works for you." You know, I try to get them in advance to see if they fit, if they're possibly on the edge.
Yeah, right. How much sag? I mean, how heavy you are, how much you make the bike sag just by sitting on it, how much sag is built in. How tall are you, Nicole?
5'4" with a pretty short inseam.
Likewise. You could ride it. You just got to get used to it. The only thing is it's not your comfort zone, but once you get there, then you're golden.
And the bike sizing rules long predated Riding Academy and Rider's Edge. Actually, the under Rider's Edge, the Blast was originally going to be larger displacement, and they lowered it to make it inside of the allowances. It was going to be 600 cc's. When did we see the prototypes? In '98, I think, and they were 600s, and then went down to whatever they went to, 460 or something.
Although Jason, I am curious with the liquid cooled, do you put coolant in them or do you run them with like water and water wetter like a track bike?
We swapped ours out for water wetter right away.
Makes sense.
Sarah Kretschmar says 5'4" is tall.
Yeah, my
It
problem
was
is
when I was in
having-
kindergarten.
My problem is having the inseam of somebody who's 4'8".
My wife would say 5'4" is tall. She's only 5'3".
My wife is 5'4" and she makes a good arm rest.
Do we need to tell her that, Mike?
Oh, I have.
Okay.
And she knows it. I'm still working on the indentation to hold the beer can on the top of her head.
Loving husband, just like me.
Rita, what other topics do you have for tonight other than KTMs? And
That's it, Jason. We've just been sitting here waiting for you to come on so we could ask you about the KTMs.
you know, I'm glad you joke like that, but it seems like every time I just come on, I get thrown under the bus for something.
It's so much fun.
That's what you get for being late, man.
All right, well, fine. I want to call out Mark Wing to tell us about what he's doing in his new home.
Right now, mostly feeding my new cat.
Let us see it.
Or we can talk about the weather where you're at, where everybody's at.
Oh, he's beautiful.
Held at the moment, but we'll work on that.
Very exciting.
Everybody wants to know what the cat's name is.
Cat.
His name is Milo, and I've been demoted from homeowner to a mere custodian.
You serve at his pleasure, man.
I kind of wonder if I could throw out a question to you all about something I've noticed since coaching more frequently.
Nope, no questions.
What's that?
No questions. It's not allowed.
And this is only Wednesday too, isn't it? How many of us are teaching classes right now?
Okay, go ahead, Mark. Let's hear it.
Where's he at? South.
Since showing up here in South Carolina, there's a 12-month training season here. Things have just gone through the winter, and we've been teaching classes, and I've had a lot more coaching time, and it's caused me to notice something that I hadn't really noticed before. And it's related to the skill test, and this might be an old question. I'm not sure if I've missed some activity on this, but the thing that I'm noticing is that come time for exercise 14 and then the skill eval, that 45-foot lead up to the quick stop and the swerve winds up being the first time that students are being asked to accelerate off the line assertively. And yet there's not anything specifically in the curriculum teaching people how to accelerate quickly off the line. I wonder how you folks are dealing with that.
I tell students, use that language actually. I said we need to, in exercise 14, I say we need to accelerate briskly, but we need to transition smoothly. I try to emphasize the transition and the smoothness so that we don't accelerate briskly and brake briskly, you know, and end up locking up. So I try to enforce just with language, brisk acceleration, smooth application of the brakes to come to a rapid stop.
I hear you, Mark. And Lynn's got some good points. I try and start relatively early. Exercise, let me get this right, because 1 is familiarization, 2 is across the range, 3, starting and stopping. Students that aren't using the throttle to leave their cone with a little bit of authority, I encourage, use a little bit of throttle. As long as you're smooth on the clutch, you can use a little more throttle and get the motorcycle moving. So they, especially in exercise 3, part 1, they can get their feet fully up before they have to start braking for that second cone. They can get up to balance speed, whatever you want to call it, relatively quickly.
If you can get them into at exercise 3, if you can get them to the point where they actually have to brake, then you won't have a problem by the time you get to 14, because they're already working on the brisk acceleration. 3 is the key.
I hadn't made that connection, but I like that.
One of the evaluation points for exercise 3 is gain some speed and roll off throttle prior to braking. So we're encouraging them to gain speed on part 2.
In the narrative, there's also language that points to the idea of pre-shifting speed. And so that they're exploring the throttle and gaining some speed. There's definitely a transition of smooth roll-on, sustained, smooth roll-off. Yeah. And that motor skill principle about speed of motion being different than speed of miles per hour, that the miles per hour can come up, but still the manipulation skills are slow and smooth. I appreciate all of that. And definitely in any given class, there's a range for what comfort students are performing that at. And the most novice students sometimes are still a little timid at the end of that exercise. And there's always a balance between, you know, how much time you spend on task versus, risking overkill and some fatigue and whatnot. So I've noticed that even sometimes, despite best intentions on early exercises, some students are kind of skating along, having yet, successfully met objectives. So this is not a counsel out consideration, but they still don't necessarily have that confidence. I kind of wonder what specific manipulations you're coaching later on, and or if you've found any other spots earlier that allow for more assertive acceleration specifically off the line, as opposed to just being able to get up to speed. Exercise 5, there's
Mark,
some brisk acceleration, but it doesn't. Yes?
The other spot where students have to jump off the line is merging into traffic during the circuit in part 2 or the next exercise, depending on what kind of range you're on, that they have to giddy up and go and get that happening. And that's a discussion point in that exercise of, are you in the right gear? Are you in the right mindset to get her done? You know, do you have the right clutch control and stuff? So there's a lot of good talking points in that exercise about the elements that go into being able to jump into the flow.
I disagree on that one as being one they have to be ready to get up and go. That it's, I like to use that exercise more of an exercise in self-evaluation as to what do they feel comfortable with, and ensuring that they're choosing an appropriate gap for their comfort level on their skill. So if they're not feeling, maybe they just don't want to get up and go really fast, but if that's the case, they're going to need to allow for a very large gap before they try to get into traffic. Just as if you were merging onto the highway, you need to choose an appropriate gap rather than it being an exercise of being able to go quickly.
I agree with that, but you know, part of it is if you think about real life, you know, the guy behind you is not expecting you to not go, you know, when the gap exists. So lots of times we have that situation where, you know, the gap is there, the student doesn't have the gumption or the skill set or the confidence to take it, and the guy behind him is already moving and up their butt, you know, in the real life scenario. So yeah, it's true. It's about the gap, but they also have to be able to make that decision to do it. It's kind of coming back to a conversation point in one of the activity sheets about being, let me think of the language. It's about being underconfident or being too safe. It's about taking risk. You know, are not, it's in activity sheet 10, I think. What's the language I'm looking for? There's one thing about being overconfident, being underconfident, and the underconfident person doesn't take the step to go, you know, and that can be a hindrance in traffic as well.
Lynn, I appreciate what you're saying about that. And I kind of wonder what specific control inputs you're encouraging people to execute in order to get that quicker jump off the line.
You know, I guess it comes down to coaching by correction. Is what did they mess up? Did they stall on the takeoff? Why did they stall on the takeoff? Were they not in the right gear? Did they not have enough gas? Did they have enough gas, but they let the clutch out too quickly? I mean, it kind of comes down to what was the situation there. But that helps them, I think, self-evaluate about, well, gee, what is my readiness to go on the street? And am I able to put all these pieces together situationally, you know, as necessary?
Yeah, and I see exercise 12, you know, is the point where it sort of opens the door to the coaching of, you know, start thinking about what it will be like in traffic. You know, not only choosing the gap, which is the key part of the exercise, but also, you know, the ability to pull out a little more briskly into traffic, and that's where they can start to develop it, especially when they get to the point where they're on their own, so they're choosing their own gap and having to make their own judgments. I really don't see much stalling at this point. Sometimes there's a little encouragement to, you know, you can use a little more throttle because there is a lot of space if they get things wrong, the way things are oriented on the range. And then when you do get to skill practice, you can take them back to, remember, when you were practicing pulling out, this is one of the skills that is necessary to pass this test, is to be able to simulate pulling and, you know, pulling away from a stop and getting the bike up to speed in a real life situation.
Yeah, of all of the things that I think are critical to be coaching in this skills practice, it's that idea of accelerating briskly for exactly the reason that you're saying, Mark. That's really the only time that we're doing that specific thing prior to the skills test. However, even in part 2 of exercise 2, or part 3 of exercise 2, where we're giving the speed up and the slow down as the riders come across the range, if you're giving them that speed up sign right when they start moving, then I think that's kind of where you start getting them to get the idea of, you know, taking off with a little bit of assertiveness.
But in exercise 2 is still minimal throttle use. So it's mostly clutch movement, maybe a little throttle at that point. I don't really see much throttle use being encouraged till the next exercise, you know, especially the second part when they are encouraged to build up to, you know, pre-shifting speed, whatever that actually is.
Mark, what is the concern that they are learning this particular technique at this point?
Rick, which point are you talking about, and which technique are you talking about?
Well, the skill test was somewhat explained to me, some of the nuances of the going from the older BRC skill test to the new one was, especially in braking and swerving, was instead of a 3-step process, the old way of speed up, stabilize, react, we went to a 2-step process of speed up and react. So we took out that stabilization in the middle. And when I'm thinking through the curriculum, we actually do one exercise or one technique in reverse, which is the pause and go, where we slow down, speed up. But you know, I guess when I'm if I'm doing the directions in 14 for the skill practice, I bring out the point of speed up, react, that it's somewhat different than there's no stabilization in there.
The cards do say maintain a steady speed after they accelerate briskly in exercise 14.
In that, well, okay, but the actual amount of time to maintain is, as we've all ridden, that's pretty darn short.
And that right there is my point, Rick. I'm seeing some students arriving at the skill evaluation, and because we haven't created formal training around the task of accelerating briskly off the line, some of the students are able to attain correct speeds and are having, you know, dings on that skill evaluation because of it. And so I mean, without specifically teaching to the test, as it were, I still see that there's value in that manipulative skill. And I understand that part of the skill test challenge was about creating a fussier manipulative skill that really represents having connected and bonded with some of the basic controls. And since we don't formally train it, and no one here so far has said exactly what manipulative skills are used to accelerate off the line more briskly, we've talked generally around it, but not specifically talked about, you know, how our throttle and clutch is used. And with the students also having that gap, it strikes me as an opportunity to better prepare students for the skill test specifically, but then, you know, general manipulative skills and overall that will help them on the street.
All right, get ready, Don. Here's the recording to start the how to get Jason disbarred from MSF forever. So, Mr. Wing, you have experienced exactly what I've been complaining about since about 2014. And in the take it into my own hands in the Jason's BRC program, for those students that don't get it, so we have those cones for exercise 6, and the point of the big cones was to go a self-start cone set where they're out at about, let's call it 110 feet, 130 feet on a full-size range, give or take. I brought them back and put them at the end, and we're talking about a full-size range, at the end of the U-turn box, and just said, those cones it'd be a nice goal if you could be up to second gear speed by right here. for those students that just plain don't get it. If you get a class that like totally gets it, cool. But I started putting up some visual markers to go, it'd be nice if. It's not an objective. It's not an anything. It's just, it'd be nice if. Just kind of like in exercise 4, the perimeter turn is kind of a nice if, because it's not an objective. It's just an introduction to. So that comes full tilt, and it also is another opportunity in exercise 9. I'm sorry, in exercise 7, for stopping quickly. Which I had to go get my range cards, and I can only find 3 real range cards in the dark. But in my head, it said stabilize speed early, which it does not. But another opportunity to do a visual marker. It would be nice if you're at 2nd gear speed here, and I'm going to call that pre-shift speed. And at some time in my verbiage, I always talk about the magical speed. If you got to have a goal, it's always 15 miles an hour. If you got to know what that is, in an exercise 5, if you're that person, you're going to hear speeds. You want to know 15 miles an hour, take an opportunity to maybe at some time glance at your speed and go, 15 miles an hour feels like this. And then in exercise 11, where we go into stopping in a curve, it's another opportunity where it says be in 2nd gear is kind of like an if you can statement in the range cards, 1st or 2nd gear. Get them into that 2nd gear before they get to the turn. Another opportunity to kind of speed up. Now, no direct verbal instructions about how we roll on more throttle and ease out the clutch even slower to make a quicker acceleration, because I don't need people on one wheel going across my range. But giving them a verbal cue to go, it'd be nice if, and here's an opportunity. And also in exercise 4, when I start out, if Rita's demoing and I'm sitting at the observation point, which is basically the perimeter turn, on one knee with students watching over my head, my action, instead of reading them what the hell the coach is actually doing out there in the review points, I read them to them quick and say, could you please verbalize when you hear the motorcycle shift to 2nd gear? Could you please verbalize when you hear the downshift, and get the students involved so they start going, oh, click, this happened. So I know that they know there is a downshift. I know that they know there is an upshift. And eventually I'll just have students talking and narrating what the heck's going on in the range, and that just works for me. But it's, to go back to it, the verbal cue of the big cones, and even when, because I do so many 3-wheel classes compared to my 2-wheel classes over the last couple years, in the exercise 5 speed up, slow down business, I've actually given them cones to accelerate to, so they have to use the brakes. And eventually I get students like, you were kidding, you wanted me to actually use, I'm like, yes, use the brakes, feel the brakes, and give them brake markers for those that don't get it. And then I take them away, because they shouldn't need it all the time. It's just an opportunity. So there you go. I've just outed myself, and will be applying at Total Control tomorrow.
What you've laid out is basically what happens in 4. When you're telling them to get up to 2nd gear, you're trying to get their speed up high enough so they can get to 2nd gear relatively smoothly. And when we demo it with not alacrity, but with, like a newbie would shift 1, 2, 3. And so we have to have the speed up fast enough to be able to show that kind of thing. And we want the student to do that too. So 3, we get the speed up. 4, we get the speed up. And then again, we're going to do it all on day 1. Again, we're going to do it on 7. And even on 7, as you pointed out, 15 miles an hour on 7, we say it's 15 miles an hour. If we're reading the cards, we say 15 miles an hour. So I think within day 1, you've got it. You've got the guys up to 15 miles an hour. If you haven't, if you still have the guy idling through your exercises, then the rider has failed to progress, and you probably have to have that conversation.
In those early exercises, I like, I don't want to force people to go fast, because if they're not ready and they have a mishap, that comes back and bites you in the butt. So I'll tell them, if you're comfortable, you can go faster, and kind of give them the, hey, you have permission to go faster if you want to. And a lot of times they'll take that up on their own, without me forcing it on them. And that seems to work pretty good.
I will also point out that as states transitioned to update, people were all afraid of the idea of, guys are going to stall the bikes. They're going to stall the bikes, and we're going to have to fail a whole bunch of people out. And it didn't prove true. We got guys to accelerate faster, and they didn't stall the bikes. So while I agree with you that it has caused some challenges, it's not causing a higher fail rate by any means. BRCU works. And I don't know that the test was done for any other reason other than to make it match what the states already do. I'm not so sure that there was a great thought process to the test.
I find that with the BRC updated, some of the stuff that was sticking points in previous curriculums, or that is sticking points in people's heads, anecdotally before they even come to the class, like stalling and shifting, are like non-issues. People tend to put it together. Once in a while, you'll have someone that's got a problem, but most people sort it out. They've got the time and a little coaching, and they're just little hiccups. They're not big problems.
I'm going to just taking a stab at this, but maybe perhaps through the field testing of the BRCU is that when you're relating the motor skill principle of control and accuracy first, maybe they found this was the only time they could bring in speed of motion, or this was the proper time to bring in the speed of the motion. Just a stab out there.
Mark, I'm curious, those students who you see having trouble getting up to speed in exercise 14 in the eval, how are they doing in exercises 11 and 12 in the straightaway, getting up to speed?
I would say also cautious. It is a little bit of a mixture, and now that I'm coaching more, I'm seeing more variation, which is really great. I don't want to be too quick to make any clear generalizations, because I don't think I've seen it all. And one of the things, though, if you look closely at objectives for each exercise, it is possible to get all the way through exercise 14 with students, meeting minimum objectives and yet still not being fully prepared for the acceleration required for the skill.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of times I see a correlation. The reason I asked is I feel like a lot of times I see a correlation between their willingness and confidence to accelerate in the straightaway and their willingness to accelerate in the exercise 14 or the eval, and the fact that it's from the line, as you say, or not, doesn't seem to make a big difference.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I understood you to say that accelerating from the line was the issue because that wasn't addressed elsewhere. But I feel like the same people who have that problem accelerating, like in the straightaway in 11 and 12 as well, when they're not accelerating from the line. So I'm not sure that whether it's from the line or not makes a difference in many of the people I've seen.
I appreciate that. I definitely see people that are exhibiting the behavior you're describing, but I see some folks that once the clutch has been engaged, they don't mind twisting the throttle and adding some speed and have some comfort using their brakes. And in fact, the confidence about using their brakes seems to correlate to their confidence in using the throttle. However, their assertiveness in taking off quickly from a dead stop is still tentative because they haven't really gotten over the hump of feeling like the clutch was their friend and really understanding exactly how it worked.
One of the things I've noticed with like in exercise 11, where you got the peanut, as everybody calls it. I have done at times where there's students that I think are not getting the speed up enough. You know, you got to get up to certain speed with it to do that 1 second run on the eval. If I time them on that one and notice they're going too slow, I will usually tell students, you need to get your speed up a little bit more, because on the skill eval, some of these skill evals are timed events, and you got to get your speed up. I do not necessarily tell them that there's that 4 out of the 5 skill evals are timed events. I just say you got to get your speed up, because there's some of the skill evals are timed events. As you all know, if their speed's not up there enough, you know, like on the skill eval 5 on the peanut run, as they say, they don't get that speed up enough within that 1 second diameter. What is that, 5 points if I remember correctly?
Maybe it's just to make myself feel better, but what I usually share with the students as far as speeds is like for the curve exercise is I want you to have enough speed in the straightaway so you have an opportunity to practice slowing enough before you get into the curves. And because we're dealing with such a small area, you'll need to accelerate briskly to get your speed up in order to have a reason to slow. And for the swerve and the braking, again, not telling them, well, it's going to be timed, but rather that we're dealing with a small area. We want you to be able to maximize your ability to practice skills. So if you can get your speed up enough that you can practice some swerving and braking from around 15 miles an hour, that will help you to maximize your learning in this time that we have in this small area.
I agree with you, Mark, that there's a relationship between students' reluctance to go fast and their comfort level with slowing down. You know, and if they don't have that comfort level with being able to take the speed away, they're not going to get on the gas. And some of the quick takeoff problems, which often results in stalling, if, you know, kind of going back to the simulated practice in exercise 2, you know, with that 5-step clutch release and 1, 2, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 4, 5, you know, I'll tell the students, hey, you're going 1, 2, 5, you know, and not giving yourself time to work through the zone. And, you know, that sometimes sorts that out, but they got to get through it quickly. And, you know, usually by that exercise, they've kind of programmed themselves into those quicker takeoffs. You know, it's something that I think can be encouraged along the way. Is, you know, work on getting up to speed more quickly, like exercise 6. You know, sometimes you'll see like a really delayed upshift before they get to the point where they need to be slowing down. They're doing their shift at that point where they almost need to be applying the brakes already, to say, hey, you know, try to get up your speed a little bit more quickly. And sometimes you can kind of just change the dynamic of where things happen, you know, in the path of travel earlier on.
You know, Lynn, you mentioned 6, and Jason mentioned exercise 6 earlier. And 2 months ago, I had a student have an incident in number 15. I really don't like incident reports. I got to say that out loud. I really don't like filling them out. Of course I do when I need to, but after this incident took place, I overheard the student explaining to other students that my encouragement for more speed off the line in exercise 14 was what he thought attributed to his incident, which bothered me on multiple levels. But it got me thinking. And in exercise 6, I've recently been asking students to tell me what they thought they would need to do if they wanted to accelerate off the line more quickly. And I didn't do much coaching because there really aren't coaching tips or evaluation points about accelerating quickly off the line in that exercise. But, you know, kind of throwing it out there as an invitation and what do you think it would take has been doing some things for me on this topic, but I'm still kind of chewing on it.
Haven't we talked before about how there seems to be and I think it is highly bike dependent. There seems to be students who rely entirely on the idle speed of the motorcycle and easing the clutch out slowly to get going. And that works fine on some bikes, but if it's a bike that doesn't work on, then they can't do that. And so they have to give the bike a little bit of throttle. And I'm still going to go back to saying that exercise 2 is where they really get it in their head that they can be doing anything with the throttle. It's the speed of the clutch release that is going to dictate how fast or how slow they accelerate or how fast they're going. So, I mean, I just feel like it's the whole gross to fine kind of thing that develops here. And there are many opportunities to coach that along the way, although I do definitely take your point, Mark, that there is nothing specific to address
I
that.
agree with you. And somewhere along the way, I try to point out that it's a relationship between the throttle and the clutch. And I asked them, what do you suppose the idle speed of your motorcycle is? If you could ease out the clutch and not stall and manage to ride without adding throttle, what do you think that speed would be? And people will come back with some numbers, and usually it's maybe 3 to 5 miles an hour. Okay, so if your idle speed is 5 miles an hour, that means your clutch is going to take you from 0 to 5. And what are you going to do with 5 miles an hour? That's not very functional. And if you're in the friction zone at idle, that means you're going slower than 5. That's not useful, But if your throttle's going 10, now your friction zone is from 0 to 10. So if you want to go 5, you can be halfway out and go 5 or 6 or 7 or 4. You've got something to work with. But if the gas is off, your friction zone becomes very small and not very useful. And that kind of, just thought process gets people, I think, over the hump that they're not afraid to use a little bit of gas. Sometimes I'll give a little, I don't hear you, and I just want to hear a little bit of throttle. And I'm not looking for the screaming rev thing, because that's a scary thing. That actually is something that I've encountered with my deaf students. They've got the gas crank wide open and they don't know it, which is scary for me. But a little bit of throttle increases the range of the friction zone, making it more functional, and students tend to have a better success rate.
On the Grom especially, where the friction zone is about that big, and if you're not giving it some gas, you're not ever going to get it out of it going.
Laura, the friction zone is not just that big, and I can kick a Grom into third gear without giving it any gas and ride it around. You just have to be slow.
Well, and they have to be adjusted. They have to be adjusted. And the problem is when a Grom is new, maybe they're not still like this, but when we first got the Groms, the clutch cables stretched instantly and you could adjust it till the cows came home at the lever and it ended up doing nothing. So, I mean, that's fixable. You can adjust it at the case, but coaches didn't know how to do that.
That's unfortunate, but I see that's totally a state issue of how far you're going to let your coaches do. When I've experienced students that really don't, they get through exercise 8, we talk about it and say, okay, so what's the thing you need to know? Hey, I'd like to learn the clutch better. Yes, you need the clutch better in order to participate. Sometimes I've taken them aside and show them extremes. And it's like, this is not to emulate anything or to watch what's going to happen. But yeah, I've kicked bikes into third gear and just let them idle with my hand off the throttle and say, the throttle and clutches, they're two very different things. And where I think that we've failed. I've listened to coaches, I've listened to trainers, and please, somebody show me where I'm wrong here, because luckily this works for me, so I'm really lucky. There is no point in exercise 2 anywhere that it says fully release the clutch. And if they do that, they're doing it wrong. And not enough of our coaches, and I'm not saying you guys, because clearly you're here, so you're trying, like I am. But my coaches that I have problems with, they're like, you just got to get that clutch out and ride it. And I tell students, like, if you've let your clutch all the way out, you're doing this wrong. I want you to adjust your idle speed left hand. Left hand is for road speed. Right hand is just pick your speed of your motorcycle. And sometimes we set them aside and say, okay, so whether it be neutral, but I'd prefer this to be in gear, hand on the clutch, and talk to students. And being that I have Z125s, it's the Kawasaki Grom, same thing. I would like you to look at your tach while you're sitting still next to me, put it at 3,500 RPMs. And it takes them a couple times to get the throttle to make it stick. Say, okay, do that, do it again, do it with your eyes closed. I need you to feel it. I need you to hear it. And then you're going to open your eyes. And now I want you to ride to the start point at that 3,500 RPMs. And I only want you to use your left hand to control road speed. That transfers into clutch control lane. It transfers into how I think it's easiest to coach a tight turn from a stop. And when I talk about clutch or going under control, slow speed and under control, everything for exercise 9 is done like that. Okay, maybe not everything, but almost everything. And the number one thing other than that short run up that Mark was talking about that I had a problem with was that when we started doing the current version of the BRC, we failed as coaches on what was exercise 13 because we were used to, and many people failed as coaches. They did not stop people after the swerve. They just let them make laps because customers were happy and having fun. When we got to the tight turn from a stop after the swerve, nobody coached that to begin with, and we had everybody fail there. It's another opportunity for low speed control, clutch control skills to get them up and out of the gate, or at least there's my 45 cents that nobody wanted to hear anyways.
Another kind of along that line, another conceptual thing for students, if they're not kind of getting the right hand, left hand thing, is something everybody can relate to. I say your right hand, your throttle hand is the guy at the town hall. He's opening the water main so everybody has water. And your left hand is you at home opening the faucet. If you open up the faucet and the water pressure is not turned down at town hall, you got squat. But if you open up the water main, even if that water main is going full, you can still get just a trickle of water coming out of your faucet by opening the faucet just a little bit. So even if your throttle were going crazy, which I don't want you to do, if you ease out the clutch just a little bit, only a little bit of power is going to go to the rear wheel. So everybody knows about water pressure and faucets. They can kind of wrap their head around that idea. And sometimes that gives them the comfort level to say, okay, I need to have the water pressure on before I open up the faucet. And we get that balance happening a little bit earlier.
I try and exaggerate that relationship a little bit during my demos in exercise 9. I generally end up, my site has CBR 250s, and they force me into good technique for exercise 9 demos, so I generally run them. But I end up doing my U-turns at 3,000 to 4,000 RPM, and it's all friction zone for speed control, so the students can hear that the motor's running relatively high RPM with speed still in control on the clutch, and then I'll point it out at the end of my demo. Did you guys hear my engine? All my speed control was right here in my left hand.
That's something for all of us to point out while demos are happening. Exercise 4 in the clutch control lane and in the turns, and exercise 5 in the offset weaves in the corners, etc. You know, just say, what do you hear? Do you hear the throttle? It's on just a little bit, you know, because bringing those RPMs up gives you that range of friction zone. And again, not to make it be screaming, because that goes in a bad direction, you know, if they don't have the control, and you know, and it's scary, but that there's a little bit of throttle to support the work that you're asking the clutch. I think something else to point out, because students are sometimes reluctant to get on the gas, part of it's the noise factor. And I tell them, hey, you know what? The engine's on the outside. It's going to make noise. Deal with it, you know?
Lynn, to that point, I've always had an awful lot of fun in exercise number 1, having them explore the range of the throttle and having them sustain some higher RPMs for a moment or two to really get comfortable with the idea that, you know, it can make that amount of noise and that they're in control of it. That one step I'll extend a little bit so that way they get a little bit of early.
I've done that too, Mark, and I'll even encourage the students with, don't worry about it. It's not your bike.
You know, and something I stole from somebody that I saw was in that exercise is to throw in some hand signals. Roll on your throttle. Everybody speed up and slow down. And they kind of get slowing down with hand signals along the way.
It seems like the idea of listening to what the motorcycle is doing is kind of an unusual idea for a lot of students. So I, as well, always kind of make a point to say, you know, listen to the motorcycle. That's really an important part of learning to ride.
Oops. I guess when we have hearing impaired students, that's one of the challenges, is that they can't hear. And I've had mixed results, frankly. I've had some hearing impaired students that totally got it, and other ones that they had no idea what was going on with their throttle and you know, weren't able to feel it, I guess. I'm not sure what their perception is, but you know, it's scary as the coach to hear the throttle cracked open wide and not knowing what's going to happen with the clutch. So some students were able to get a sensation through vibration or whatever about appropriate, and others were not. So,
Lynn, the thing with the hearing impaired students, I've learned when I taught that class several years ago with hearing impaired, they were able to feel that vibration of that bike. And I think a lot of, at that time, we had a couple of Kawasaki's and Suzuki's, but I don't remember the models. But, you know, feel the vibration. It's the same thing with somebody that does have hearing. They close their eyes a second maybe and just listen to the vibration, listen to the RPMs and the noise. That'll help them some, I think.
so some of them adapt and some of them don't. You know, it's funny.
You're right.
You know, it's not something that we can turn off and experience. So it's hard to kind of put yourself in their shoes.
Mark, to bring it back around to your student comment, every time something goes bad in my class, I bring it back to an encouragement I got from Mark Wing as well.
I'm screwed.
You know, that's that thing where, you know, so often when I give a coach, I preface it with, if you're comfortable, because that way it puts it on them. You know, I'm not forcing them to do it. I'm not making them do it. If you're comfortable, try this. And that way, you know, if they try it, it's on them, not on me.
It's been nice chatting with you all, folks, tonight. Be well. I'll see you soon.
Good night. All right, gang. Shutting her down. Good to see y'all smiling faces. Maybe we need to make a Google Sheets to give somebody the conch every week when Dawn leaves on.